Fixing some old farmer's truck for free? Your own roof's still leaking? The neighbor's voice was thick with sarcasm as Ben Carter knelt beside the dusty pickup on the roadside, tools in hand, grease on his shirt. He didn't respond, just kept tightening the bolt, calm and focused. A few feet away, his little boy, Logan, sat patiently in the car, sipping juice, watching his father like he was invincible. But the next morning, when 3 black SUVs rolled to a stop in front of Ben's rundown house, the same neighbor stood frozen behind his curtain. Who was that old man? He whispered. And, more importantly, why did a high-level government convoy show up for a broke mechanic with nothing but a toolbox and a conscience? The hum of an old ceiling fan, the creak of worn floorboards, and the gentle clatter of spoons against a chipped ceramic bowl. These were the sounds that greeted Ben Carter every morning now, a far cry from the controlled chaos of the military motor pool he used to command, once known as Sergeant Carter, a lead heavy-duty mechanic with the U.S. Army's 1st Armored Division. Ben now lived on the quieter outskirts of Thomas, Georgia, in a house that had seen better days. Its roof leaked when the rain came down to hard. The paint was peeling. The porch steps groaned under weight, and the heater sputtered more than it worked. But it was home for him and for Logan, his 5-year-old son. Ben was only 36, but life had weathered him. His hands bore the calluses of military service, but deeper marks came from loss. His wife, Melissa, had died 3 years prior after a brutal 11-month fight with cancer. She'd been the kind of woman who lit up any room, smart, steady, kind to the core, a high school math teacher. She'd planned every detail of their future, the right time to have kids, the right school district, the right savings plan. Cancer didn't care about plans. Ben had left active duty shortly after Melissa's passing. The military had offered to support him through her treatment, and they had. But once she was gone, he couldn't justify staying in. He couldn't be everywhere at once. And Logan needed a father more than the Army needed a mechanic. Since then, life had been a patchwork of odd jobs. Ben fixed broken farm equipment out of barns older than he was. He hauled fertilizer one day and pallets of drywall the next. Sometimes he worked nights as a delivery driver, sometimes weekends, as a backup at Henderson's Auto, a local garage run by his old Army buddy. The money was never stable, but he made just enough to cover rent, food, and the daycare bill. Ben never complained. He didn't have time to, every morning. He made breakfast for Logan, usually cereal or scrambled eggs, then packed a tiny backpack, kissed his son on the forehead, and dropped him off at Miss Janine's. And every evening, no matter how greasy, sweaty, or bone-tired he was, he gave Logan a bath, read him a story, and tucked him into bed. Good dads show up, he often reminded himself, even when they're running on empty. The nights were harder. That was when the quiet stretched long, and the memories crept in. Nights with Melissa, when they used to sit on the back porch drinking coffee and planning their future, deployment stories that still clung to his bones. The first time Logan said "Daddy" after Melissa's funeral, the nights he cried alone, staring at bills he didn't know how to pay. But beneath all the strain, Ben Carter carried a quiet strength. Not loud, not the kind you saw in medals or salutes, but the kind forged in silence. When you stay up late fixing a tractor for someone who can't afford to pay you, or change a tire on the side of the road while your own gas tank is running on fumes, Ben had a code he lived by, one first taught by his first sergeant back in boot camp. You help because it's right, not because it's rewarded. And that stuck. It stuck through war zones, hospital rooms, funeral parlors, and small-town sidewalks. For Logan, his dad was more than a provider. He was a hero in oil-stained jeans. The boy's small fingers would often trace the scars on Ben's hands and ask, "Did you get this fixing a tank, Daddy?" Ben would smile and nod, never explaining that some scars came from places far deeper than machinery. They didn't have much, no big vacations, no new car, but they had a quiet kind of life, a resilient kind, the kind that, from the outside, looked ordinary, maybe even forgettable. But inside those walls, between bedtime stories and carburetor rebuilds, something steady was being built, a father, a son, and a legacy rooted not in what you have, but in how you live. The Georgia sun was low, casting long golden shadows across the road. As Ben Carter steered his beat-up Ford down the back highway, Logan was buckled into the back seat, humming to himself between sips from his juice bottle. They'd just finished a delivery job for Henderson's Hardware, nothing glamorous. Just 20 bags of soil to a nursery outside of town. But it paid enough to cover groceries for the week. As they rounded a bend near a stretch of farmland, Ben spotted it. A truck, older than most, parked haphazardly on the shoulder. The hood was up, steam rising like a warning flare. Beside it stood a man tall, gray-haired, wearing a mud-stained jacket, staring silently under the hood. Ben slowed instinctively, one hand on the wheel, the other already reaching for his tool bag behind the seat. "Hang tight, buddy," he told Logan, pulling off the road. "You going to help him?" the boy asked. "Looks like he needs it," Ben replied, stepping out into the dust. The older man didn't wave, didn't call out. He just nodded once, eyes tracking Ben's approach with a sort of calm detachment. Most stranded motorists showed signs of frustration or panic, but not this one. He stood as if he were waiting for something, not rescue, but revelation. Ben popped the hood further and leaned in. "Corroded terminals," he muttered. "Timing might be off, too. This thing's older than I am." No response. "Name's Ben," he offered, fishing tools from his bag. Still nothing, just a quiet gaze, like the man was sizing him up for something deeper than a mechanical fix. Ben didn't mind. He'd worked with enough old vets and stoic farmers to know not everyone likes small talk. The silence was broken by a familiar, sneering voice behind him. "Well, look who's fixing strangers' trucks while his own place is falling apart. Mr. Dobbs," Ben's neighbor, called out as he passed on foot. He lived down the street and had made a hobby out of belittling Ben's efforts to hold his life together. "Should have spent that time patching your roof instead, Carter." Ben didn't flinch. He just kept working, wiping sweat from his brow as the sun dipped lower. He'd long learned that people like Dobbs measure life in status and appearances, things Ben had stopped chasing the day Melissa died. From the car window, Logan watched, wide-eyed, his chin resting on the doorframe. His father, covered in grease, bent over a stranger's engine, focused and unwavering. To the little boy, this wasn't just a repair, it was heroism. After nearly 40 minutes, the engine turned over with a heavy rumble, sputtered, then settled into a steady idle. Ben tapped the hood twice and stepped back. "She'll get you home," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Finally, the older man spoke, his voice low and even. "You didn't ask my name." Ben shrugged. "Didn't need to, but I won't forget yours." There was a pause, one that didn't feel like the end of a conversation, but the start of something else. Then the man climbed into his truck, nodded once, and drove off. Ben watched the dust settle as the truck disappeared down the road. He turned back to Logan, who greeted him with the kind of look no money could buy, pure admiration. "Dad," the boy asked as they buckled back in, "do you think he was someone important?" Ben smiled faintly. "Didn't matter, buddy. He needed help. That's all I saw." It was a philosophy he'd carried from military life into civilian struggle. You help people not because of who they are, but because it's the right thing to do. That night, after Logan was in bed and the house was quiet, Ben replayed the moment in his mind. There was something odd about the man, not his silence, but his presence. Calculated, composed. It didn't sit right, but it didn't feel wrong. Either just unfinished. He didn't know that the truck he fixed had carried more than an engine. It had carried a plan, and tomorrow morning, that plan would come knocking. Morning came like any other. The smell of instant coffee filled the kitchen while Ben Carter sliced a bruised apple. For Logan's breakfast, the toaster sputtered, and the old ceiling fan clanked with every slow spin. The house creaked like it was waking up reluctantly. Sunlight filtered through the curtains in slanted rays, landing on a stack of overdue bills that Ben had stopped organizing weeks ago. He tried not to look at them. Across the table, Logan chattered about dinosaurs and trucks between bites of toast, milk dripping from his chin. Then the sound came, a low rumble, then tires crunching gravel, then horns. Ben's brow furrowed. He walked to the front window, pulling the curtain aside, and froze. 3 black SUVs sat parked in a perfect line along the curb. The sun glinted off their polished surfaces, like they didn't belong on his worn-out street. Each had tinted windows, government plates, and a quiet authority that didn't need sirens. For a moment, Ben didn't move. His body registered it before his mind could. Military, or something close. Daddy. Logan's small voice broke the silence. There's people outside. Ben opened the screen door and stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, a dish towel still slung over his shoulder. His front yard was a mess of patchy grass and Logan's scattered plastic toys. He suddenly felt exposed, like someone had turned a spotlight on a life he'd worked hard to keep hidden. From the center SUV, a man in plain clothes stepped out. He was tall, silver-haired, and walked with the kind of posture Ben hadn't seen since the Army. Shoulders back, chin level, gaze steady. 2 others followed, each scanning the surroundings. With silent professionalism, the man approached slowly, confidently. When he got to the porch, he produced a leather folder and opened it. Inside, a badge and credentials. Mr. Carter, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Whitaker, formerly with Joint Special Operations Command. We're here on behalf of the Veteran Personnel Outreach Division. Someone you met yesterday would like to speak with you. Ben's heart pounded. His mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Had there been a mix-up with his military discharge, a custody issue with Melissa's parents, of audit? Then, from the SUV, a figure emerged, tall, composed, familiar. The old man from the broken-down truck, except now, instead of a stained jacket, he wore a pressed gray blazer and polished boots. The calm detachment in his eyes was still there, but now it was clear what it had been, a command. Ben stood straighter without meaning to. Old habits, old instincts. Ben Carter, the man said. Voice strong. I'm General Nathaniel Caldwell, retired. I served as Commander of Operations in Afghanistan and now advise the Department of Defense. Yesterday, you fixed my truck without asking who I was. Ben's jaw tightened. Sir, I didn't know. Exactly, Caldwell said, nodding. And that's why I'm here. He glanced toward the porch. May we come inside? Ben hesitated only a moment, then opened the door. Please, inside. Logan's eyes widened as the uniformed-looking stranger stepped in. Caldwell crouched slightly to meet the boys' gaze and smiled. You must be Logan. Your dad's a good man. Logan blinked. He fixes stuff, like everything. Ben tried to hide a smile as he guided Logan to his room. Go play for a bit, buddy. I'll be right there. Back in the kitchen, Ben sat opposite Caldwell, hands resting on the table, like they were back in a military debrief. Only this wasn't Iraq or Germany. This was a house with a leaky roof and a fridge that rattled. Mr. Carter, Caldwell said, his tone shifting to serious. Yesterday, you performed more than a mechanical fix. You proved a principle, one we've been looking for. You helped a stranger, not knowing his name, his rank, or his purpose. That's exactly the character this country needs. He slid an envelope across the table. And now, I'd like to make you an offer. Ben didn't touch it. What kind of offer? Caldwell smiled faintly. One that could change everything for you and your son. Outside, the 3 SUVs remained still, but inside, Ben's entire world had just been set in motion. Ben Carter stared at the envelope lying on his kitchen table. Its edges were crisp, the kind of official stationery that usually meant one of 2 things, trouble or opportunity. He didn't move to open it. Instead, he looked across the table at General Nathaniel Caldwell, who sat like he belonged there, calm, but deliberate, an authority figure in a space usually reserved for cereal spills and late-night worry. You're offering me a job, Ben finally said, because I fixed your truck, General. Caldwell didn't blink. No, Mr. Carter, I'm offering you a future because you fixed it for the right reasons. Ben leaned back slightly, still guarded. I don't have a college degree. Haven't worked in an official facility since I left the Army. Most of the time, I'm under tractors or chasing parts across county lines. I'm nobody special. Caldwell raised an eyebrow. That's where you're wrong. You're exactly the kind of person we need. And that toolbox in your truck, that's your resume. Ben chuckled, under his breath, half from disbelief, half from habit. "So what is this, a recruitment pitch?" "Something like that," Caldwell said. "We're launching a program, a pilot initiative called the Veteran Technical Corps. It's designed to employ veterans with real-world mechanical and operational experience to help rebuild and maintain America's aging infrastructure, power grids, water systems, emergency response vehicles, communication lines, the backbone of the country most people don't even think about until it fails." Ben tilted his head. "You want me to fix broken pipes?" "No," Caldwell said, voice lowering. "I want you to help fix a broken system, one where people, like you, skilled, disciplined, and committed, are left scraping by because you didn't take the traditional path. That needs to change." He pointed to the envelope. "Inside is a full offer, salary 3 times what you're making now, housing assistance, health insurance, a guaranteed placement in Georgia, and a tuition voucher for Logan when he's ready for school." Ben didn't open it. His hands rested on either side of the envelope, like it was something sacred. He thought about Logan's second-hand shoes, the rust stain on the bathtub that never went away, the night he'd cried in the dark bathroom because he couldn't afford to fix the roof and pay for groceries that month. "But why me?" Ben asked. "Why not somebody with credentials? Because credentials don't always mean character." Caldwell said simply, "Yesterday, I staged my 14th roadside breakdown in 3 states. You were the first person who stopped without hesitation, no questions, no requests for payment, and no idea who I was." Ben sat still, stunned. "You saw someone in trouble," Caldwell continued, "and you helped. That tells me more than a stack of polished resumes ever could." For a long moment, nothing moved. The house was quiet. Logan was humming faintly in his room. A breeze stirred the curtain. Ben reached for the envelope and slowly opened it. Typed neatly inside was a full breakdown of the offer. Training schedule, salary, housing, location, benefits, contact numbers. It was real, not a handshake and a promise, but a structure, a lifeline, a future. He swallowed hard. "I thought no one noticed people like me anymore," he said quietly. Caldwell's voice softened. "We do, and now it's time to act on it." Ben nodded slowly. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he knew he couldn't keep living in survival mode. Logan deserved more than just getting by. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a miracle. Maybe it was simply recognition for a man who had kept doing the right thing. Long after the world stopped watching, Caldwell stood, buttoning his jacket. "You've got 48 hours. We begin training next month in Atlanta. You'll be home on weekends." Ben stood too. They shook hands, firm, wordless, a soldier's handshake. "Oh," Caldwell added, halfway to the door, "bring your tools, first days. A hands-on assessment." Ben cracked a smile. "That I can do." As the black SUV rolled away and the dust settled, Ben leaned on the porch rail, envelope in hand. He wasn't sure where this road would lead, but for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid to follow it. 6 months. That's how long it took for Ben Carter's life to change in ways he never imagined possible. The first few weeks at the Veteran Technical Corps Training Center in Atlanta were overwhelming. Ben walked into classrooms filled with former soldiers, sailors, mechanics, and medics, men and women with weathered faces and calloused hands, each carrying their own version of the same story. Years of service followed by years of struggle. There were moments Ben doubted himself. The technology had evolved. The systems were new. He hadn't taken notes in a decade, but muscle memory was strong, and so was the quiet grit that had carried him through darker battles. Slowly, his confidence returned. He asked questions. He stayed late. He offered help to those who'd fallen behind. And when it came time for hands-on assessments, Ben didn't just perform, he led. By the end of the program, instructors weren't just giving Ben a certificate. They were offering him a leadership role. "You've got something rare," his supervisor had told him. "Experience, humility, and the respect of your peers." Back home, things were changing, too. Logan, now 6, was enrolled in a better school. Their new rental house had reliable heat, a roof that didn't leak, and a small backyard where Ben built a sandbox by hand. He still fixed things, leaky faucets, old engines, even a neighbor's broken lawnmower, but now he did it on his terms. not out of desperation. The job that followed the training program placed Ben in charge of infrastructure assessments across rural Georgia. He worked with power crews, coordinated with water treatment facilities, and trained newer recruits entering the veteran program. And every time he laced his boots, he remembered the day someone had looked past his worn clothes and toolbox and seen potential. But the biggest surprise came 1 year later, in the form of an invitation to Washington, D.C. General Caldwell, now serving as a senior advisor to the president, wanted Ben to speak at a congressional briefing on veteran workforce development. Ben had never spoken into a microphone before, but when he stepped into that room, dressed in a simple gray suit that still felt foreign on his frame, he wasn't nervous. He just told the truth. "I didn't ask for a handout," he told the committee. "I asked for a chance to keep serving, and I got one, not because of a resume, but because someone believed my character still mattered." Cameras clicked, reporters scribbled, but Ben wasn't there for attention. He was there for every veteran who'd ever walked out of uniform and into invisibility. After that, the program expanded. More states adopted the model. Veteran technical corps partnered with technical colleges and municipal agencies. And at the center of the initiative was Ben, not just a mechanic anymore, but a mentor, a symbol of what could happen when the country remembered those who once served it. His days were full: site visits, project plans, training seminars. But Ben always made time for Logan. They still ate dinner together every night, still read bedtime stories, still rebuilt engines on weekends. Sometimes they'd swing by Mr. Dobbs' place, fixing a heater or changing a light fixture. Logan once asked, "Why help someone who was mean to you?" Ben had smiled. "Because helping people isn't about who they are. It's about who we are." In a quiet corner of his new office sat the old envelope Caldwell once handed him. Ben never threw it away. It reminded him that opportunity doesn't always arrive in a grand gesture. Sometimes it shows up in the form of 3 black SUVs, a quiet stranger, and a truck that wouldn't start. He'd gone from forgotten to foundational, from survival mode to service again. But through it all, Ben never changed the way he saw the world. People were worth fixing for, and sometimes fixing one thing meant healing everything. It started with a story, not a press release, not a viral video, just a quiet recounting. General Nathaniel Caldwell, standing before Congress, sharing the story of a man who knelt beside a stranger's truck with grease on his hands and a 4-year-old waiting patiently in the car. He called it an act of invisible service, and he insisted that moment was worth more than a resume, more than a degree worth investing in. The room had been full of suits, screens, and skeptical stares, but as Caldwell spoke, measured, steady, direct, you could feel the energy shift. He didn't appeal to pity. He appealed to purpose. "We spend billions on readiness, equipment, technology, operations," he said. "But the true strength of our nation lies in people like Ben Carter, not because they wore the uniform once, but because when they took it off, they kept living by its code." That hearing triggered something. News outlets picked it up. Veteran organizations amplified it. Soon, Ben Carter's story, once confined to a dusty roadside and a quiet porch, was echoed across the country. Small towns in Nebraska, flood-damaged districts in Louisiana, failing power grids in Appalachia. Everywhere there were broken systems. There were veterans like Ben, skilled, underutilized, and more than ready to serve again. Applications to the veteran technical corps surged. Colleges and trade schools formed partnerships. Cities started creating local chapters. And Ben? He kept working. He declined interviews on national morning shows, politely turned down a book deal. When asked why, he said simply, "I didn't fix that truck to be remembered. I fixed it because someone once fixed mine." But behind the scenes, Ben became a voice of practical wisdom. He sat on advisory boards, helped design hands-on assessments, traveled to different regions to speak with veterans who'd lost hope. And everywhere he went, he listened. One night, after a town hall in rural Kansas, a woman in her 60s approached him. Her son had served, came back lost, couldn't find work. Now, he was building solar arrays through the corps. "He smiles again, Mr. Carter," she said, holding his hand. You gave me my boy back. Ben didn't feel like a hero. He still drove the same truck, still wore the same boots, but he understood now. Small acts ripple. One truck, one decision. One life lifted, and then another. And General Caldwell, he never forgot the moment Ben knelt in the dirt without asking for a name. He kept using that moment, that pure, unfiltered example of character to remind the country what service really means. We don't just need to thank veterans, Caldwell told. Lawmakers, we need to empower them. Let them keep building, fixing, leading not out of charity, but because they are the best at it. Ben Carter had once felt invisible. Now, his values were shaping national policy. And somewhere back in Georgia, he and Logan still sat on the porch. Some evenings quiet, steady, whole. Not every hero wears a uniform forever. Some hang it up, trade it for worn-out jeans and grease-stained hands, and just keep doing the right thing. Even when no one's watching. Ben Carter's story isn't about fame, medals, or speeches. It's about values, the kind passed down quietly from father to son, from soldier to civilian, from one generation to the next. His act of kindness didn't make headlines at first, but it changed a life, then a program, then a nation. In today's America, where so many feel unseen, veterans, blue-collar workers, single parents, maybe the question isn't who's in charge, but who's still showing up, who's still lending a hand, fixing what's broken, and doing good just because it's right. So, here's a question for you. Have you ever helped someone not for reward, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do? Or maybe someone once did that for you. We'd love to hear your story in the comments. It might be small, it might be quiet, but it might just inspire someone else today. Thank you for spending your time with us. If this story moved you, helped you reflect, or reminded you of someone you respect, please give it a like, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more stories that honor everyday heroes. Because sometimes the most powerful change doesn't come from orders, it comes from character, and that is always worth remembering.